Hey everyone, welcome back to the 443 Security Simplified. I'm your host, Mark the Liberty, and joining me today is...
Corey, one CISO to rule them all. Not Griner.
That's Harry Potter, yo.
Hey, Gandalf has a staff and a wand.
Whatever. Anyways, on today's
episode... My wandering is upstairs, Mark. Give me a break.
On today's episode, we will go over one token to rule them all. Before diving into the Shai Hulud NPM worm that ran rampant last week. And then we will end with a quick review of a recent Firebox vulnerability and what Firebox administrators need to do to take action. But with that, let's go ahead and throw ourselves into the ring of fire of Mount Doom.
You shall not pass.
Yes, Corey, let's get started then with that first story where a researcher called Dirk-Jan Mollema posted a blog post last week discussing CVE 2025-55241, which Microsoft describes as a Azure Entra elevation of privilege vulnerability and what Mr. Mollema describes as one token to rule them all. Where basically their blog post, they walk through how they discovered this issue that ultimately granted them or could have enabled them to get global admin on any Microsoft Entra ID tenant that they wanted. And not only could they gain this privileged access to any tenant, but none of their activity would have been logged along the way too until they started messing around write access in the tenant. This is before we get into the details, this is genuinely, I think, as bad as it gets in Entra ID or Azure ID, whatever you want to call it. A way to get global admin with really no or very little logging. Scare the crap out of me. Good news is discovered and responsibly reported to Microsoft and resolved very quickly from them. And Microsoft even granted it a CVE, even though it's a cloud vulnerability that doesn't require user interaction. Their policy still is to publish CVEs for critical severity issues. And this one is a 10 out of 10. Which makes sense why they'd grant one. So the vulnerability comes from a legacy undocumented access control service that's used for authenticating to like SharePoint applications and Exchange Online, and even used by Microsoft internally, at least up until recently, it seems like. It grants what are called actor tokens, which is a JSON web token that lets an application like your Exchange on-premises server do things on behalf of a user. It's like, let's say through Exchange, you wanted to access a file or something. Exchange would go through this process to get an actor token for your account that would then let it go get a file on your behalf, for example. Exchange could request this actor token. It returns a JSON web token, so it's just a standard JSON web token type of a file back. It includes fields like the tenant that was issued to, an expiration date, which is always 24 hours, and an ID for the user. And this token, it's signed too. And so you couldn't tamper with this specific token if you wanted to. Microsoft would at least validate that. But this isn't the only token that's used. So basically, the whole process takes this actor token, as we're calling it, and then sticks it inside a impersonation token, which is what the researcher calls it. So a second JSON web token that has a field that is this cryptographically signed one, as well as some other fields too. Things like the tenant that it's trying to access, a name ID field, which matches up with a user account's net ID attribute that every single account in Entra ID has. And notably though, this impersonation token is not signed. It's generated by like the Exchange server in normal circumstances. And what's supposed to happen would be Microsoft validates that the net ID and this impersonation token matches the user account in the signed access token or actor token that's included in it. As you may be guessing, that doesn't happen. So that means once an actor gets this actor token, they can use it to impersonate anyone on the targeted service for 24 hours just by changing the name ID in that kind of parented impersonation token. If you're much easier to see if you're following along on the video screen where you can see the impersonation one with its fields, and then that actor token is just a embedded field inside of it. There's a few things that make this even worse and scarier. So there's no logs when that actor token is issued. There's no logs when the impersonation token is created or used. That actor token can't be revoked within the 24-hour validity. As soon as it's issued, it's good for 24 hours, period. And all of this access bypasses Entra ID's conditional access rules.
Oops.
If you said you can only log in from a authorized device in like this region, nope, this would work no matter what. Microsoft previously used this same process on the back end to let services communicate with each other, like service to service communication. But they actually published a blog post in July talking about how they're hardening their back end and getting rid of some of this service to service communication. But they still use this actor token and impersonation token thing elsewhere, including in this endpoint up until now. But again, it gets worse. It's not just impersonating any user within a tenant. The researcher found that you could actually just change the tenant ID on that impersonation token to any tenant in Entra, and that actor token would be valid there too.
I could see a mistake of a tenant token that everyone should know that a JW it's attached to a login. You log in doing some authentication, and the JWT, this token, is just your way of keeping the login session active. But the idea that not only can you take a login if you capture that and make it do anything, but now you can change the ID of this sub token that didn't have a signature and do anything anywhere. Wow, that's bad.
It's
That is
crazy.
Not sufficient, right? That makes it sound not great, but no, it's horrible.
They so the researcher gave a couple of like proof of concepts for this could be exploited. Like if you were a guest in a tenant, it makes it easy to get the tenant ID. It makes it easy to look up the net ID of any user, including global admins in there. And so you could use that global admin's net ID and the tenant ID to then impersonate them and do whatever the heck you want in the tenant. For a more practical attack, if you weren't already a guest in the tenant, so you can pretty easily find the tenant ID for any organization that's using Entra just by using the public APIs and their domain name. It's not supposed to be private, it's public. You can pretty easily find a net ID just by brute forcing them, which we'll get into in a second. And then once you find just a valid net ID within a tenant, you can log in impersonating them, get a list of the global admins and their net IDs, and then impersonate a global admin and do whatever you want. So there's a like attack chain in here that is valid and could have worked. Because it turns out those net IDs, they're not like random, they're sequential globally across Entra ID. The researcher found that like a newly created user in their tenant was within 100,000 to 100 million for the net ID of a newly created user in another tenant. So they suspected it would only take like a couple of minutes or a couple of hours to brute force it. Oh, and by the way, none of that brute force authentication would have been logged either. So pretty
an ID that's not logged.
Yes. Pretty trivial ways to find the things you need in order to exploit this one. They did report this to Microsoft on July 14th. Microsoft asked them to stop testing on July 15th. They fixed it on the 17th and did additional mitigations on August 6th. And then Microsoft published their advisory on the 4th of September. And this blog post from the researcher just came out a couple of days ago at the time of this reporting. So Microsoft did act on it quickly, but I bet someone on Microsoft's like security response team like crapped their pants as soon as they saw this one come in because it's scary.
It's a big deal. I don't know. Is this a good like? It's funny. Us P-Cert and teams it's scary, but it's also wow. This is a big one. Like it's the most activated you would be as a product security team when you see, and the fact that it was found externally, wow, ups it too.
And now I'm wondering, like, what are the chances that someone else found this before the research? It's been around for a long time. It was using like a legacy multi-year-old API to do a lot of the work. Like,
that's the issue, right? How do you know if this has been exploited or not? There were other like Microsoft Cloud master key, like the whole, I think a certificate was stolen by a Chinese government that got something that could log into it. Like, what if they also knew this and have been doing this, and because there's no logging on it until they really start to take abusive actions, how would you even know?
Yeah,
That's
because
the question.
everything up to and including dumping all of the information out of the tenant, like read only, wouldn't be logged in this case, and anywhere that you would see it.
If I
It's
was a
only once
state
they start
sponsor,
modifying stuff. Yeah,
now if I were a state sponsored, government hacking group, I would have been sitting on this and using it for espionage for ages. Like once you know this and you know it's not logged, just don't write. You could read everything in all kinds of organizations and individuals' environments to get all you need and do a different attack, and then never know how you got the insider information to carry out the root cause of a different attack. When they fix that attack, well, guess what? You're still in their Microsoft tenants watching everything they do.
yeah,
Who knows, maybe we'll find out. But how the sad thing is, conspiracy theory, this is great for those folks, but because with no logging, you could take the assumption it's never happened, he's found it for the first time, or you can take the assumption that maybe it's been exploited for a long time and we'll never really know without some kind of proof, which will be hard to find with no logging
yep.
of this.
I'm not familiar with Microsoft's bug bounty tables, but I hope that Dirk Jan Malema is like a millionaire now, because this
seems like
worth
a
a
good
ton.
one.
This would be worth a ton on black market websites. So hopefully Microsoft did him well when he reported this one. But yeah, this is prime target for nation state actors. Thankfully, it is resolved. In their blog post on this, the research post, they do include some like IOAs you could look for, at least once they start abusing that global admin session. Like the authentication would look like it's coming from, I think it was Exchange Online, but it would be the UUID of the user. That's a potential red flag there. It does show the source IP as well too. So if it doesn't match up with what you're expecting, that could be a red flag. But again, that's only once they start like modifying things in your tenant, like adding accounts or modifying their own permissions, which, like you said, they could just sit there and siphon off info and then use it for other attacks. And I guess you would never know.
If I were a smart actor that had this as a 0 day, I would not want to. I would not want to leak it to the world. So I would not use write, because the value of the insider information could get you probably everything else you needed to get in and write in a different way.
Yeah. Scary stuff, man. But thankfully fixed.
Welcome to the 443 podcast. If you're a new listener, all is rosy in this lovely world. There is no dumpster fire anywhere.
Speaking of scary stuff, so Corey, how many NPM supply chain attacks have we had in the last month? I think we're on 4.
I feel like 3 or 4. I feel like we just talked about one last week.
Last week.
We probably won't have to talk about it again, because man, lightning doesn't strike 5 times, does it?
Surely not. Well, last week, malicious versions of multiple popular NPM JavaScript packages were published to the Node Package Manager Index. These included a post-install script that stole data and exfiltrated it back to public GitHub repos following the naming convention Shai Hulud and then something. For those that aren't...
Wait. Shai Hulud is cool. I support Shai Hulud. Go Dune. What's wrong with that?
Yeah. For those that aren't Dune nerds, that's the name of the sandworm within Dune. So if the script found any like NPM tokens along the way, it would siphon them out of the environment and then publish new malicious versions of the packages that it could access, and basically act as a self-propagating worm throughout NPM. It quickly ballooned from a couple dozen infected packages to like a bit over 100, I think. By the time that
7, I believe.
Yeah. And so it looks like this all might have originated from the same threat actor that originally compromised a couple of popular packages called NX and a few others just a few weeks ago at the end of August. And that's actually one we did not talk about on the podcast when that happened. Talked about one last week about a couple of compromised packages used to steal like cryptocurrency. This NX supply chain attack back at the end of August had similar impacts where they would steal steal secrets, publish them in public GitHub repositories that started with singularity, with 1 instead of an I for the first I in that word. That one would try and steal like NPM tokens and GitHub tokens and everything. And the attacker seems to have like chilled out for a little bit after that one. Like they were active for a few days. There was, I think, by the end of it, like 1,000 public repositories with stolen info from that Singularity event. They took a few weeks off, and now they came back with a vengeance with this self-propagating worm. They seem to have learned quite a bit. Wiz had a great report on this one. They think the initial access vectors included things like those NPM tokens stolen in that Singularity event, GitHub tokens stolen in that, phishing against just NPM maintainers, and then abuse of earlier victims of this Shai Hulud worm. It would then use to go after people that downloaded those now compromised repositories too. The repos included, or the packages included Truffle Hog, which is a popular secret scanning tool to try and identify any secrets. It would validate the credentials, and if it found GitHub tokens, it would create a public repository in that organization named after Shai Hulud, and dump all of those harvested credentials. It would then publish a new GitHub action workflow to all accessible repositories to try and steal all of those repos secrets, and then siphon them off to the attackers. Interestingly enough, like it seems like they may not have expected it to get as big as they did. They were using a service called webhook.site to exfiltrate some of this data, but they were using a free version, which was limited to only 100 callbacks to the endpoint they spun up. And their account was actually quickly deactivated for excessive activity after launching
Which
this
just
attack.
means if they had paid for it, this could have been much worse and infected more packages, probably.
There were still hundreds of repositories affected, including a bunch owned by like big name players like CrowdStrike. There's a really popular repository called Tiny Color, which has like a bit over 2 million weekly downloads. So it seemed to have succeeded pretty well in propagating. But Corey, this is getting a bit like sketchy with the number of supply chain attacks we've seen against just NPM specifically, let alone everything else from last year.
We've predicted this. We've talked about it a lot. And this is like, they're clearly going after developers. So this is like the supply chain attack on the supply chain, because the NPM is a supply chain of packages that not every, but I would say a huge amount of developers use. And by using this specific attack to steal the development keys and GitHub keys, they're trying to get into the supply chains of many, many not just the packages, but if you get in, but CrowdStrike, like, I mean, it's, by the way, I haven't searched today, but CrowdStrike has not posted as of yesterday that I could find any sort of response to their packages being there.
I saw one, they posted a reply to a Reddit thread where they said that none of them were included in anything critical. They cleaned them all out and no major impact. So good for that.
Because that's one of the wonders. Like, if for those packages, it's not just I'm showing a long list of packages right now. But it's not just if you use that package, should you worry about your package being Trojanized, but all of these organizations may have developer keys and may suffer breaches if they got enough from those GitHubs to attack these companies. And then if you're using the package, would become a third level of tier. So yeah, this is like the penultimate example of attacking the supply chain of the supply chain.
But even this one, like, it's still. So we talked last week about how all they did was steal cryptocurrency wallets, or try and steal cryptocurrency transactions by inserting themselves in the connection. Even this one isn't as bad as it could have been. Like, they outed themselves pretty quickly by setting up these public repositories to make it clear for like every organization that they affected with this one. If they were a little quieter and they were just stealing secrets, sending them to somewhere else, like, this could have gone on for quite a bit longer.
Yeah. In this case, we don't know what the impact really could have been. Like, if the impact is just install a crypto miner, you're kind of stupid for the power of that attack. But in this case, I don't think they're even trying to do impact yet. I think they're gathering a whole bunch of credentials and secrets so that they can launch many, many attacks. So we don't know if they were big enough. Like, this could, they're not just stupidly installing crypto miners. They could have had very bad things in mind. But like you said, thank goodness. It's almost like the XY utils attack that, if folks remember, a very common package that had a long con that took like around 4 or 5 years for a malicious developer to get into the real open source team and Trojanize that. That would have affected the entire industry, if not for just one Microsoft developer noticing OpenSSL was a tiny bit slow for a scale app. And it's the same thing. If they just did not make the mistake of having a free app in their attack chain that tipped off that it was doing something malicious, this could have been bad. They're not as stupid as the last one in that they're not just throwing away a big hack for a dumb reason, but they are stupid in that they gave up their big hack for a silly mistake.
But
I'm
even then, they
glad though.
still,
Thank goodness.
they may not be done yet, because I mean, this
No.
started 2.5, 3 weeks ago. They took some time off. They came back even bigger this last week. They'll probably take some time off, go through the credentials they have, and maybe the next one will, I don't know, totally tip over NPM and get everything. Who knows?
Let's hope not. I mean, we just talked about it. Like at this point, NPM needs to realize they have a huge freaking target on their shoulders or whatever. So at this point, I really hope that they're updating their scanning game quite a bit.
Yeah, agreed. If you do happen to be a developer, maybe quickly go search through your GitHub repositories for anything named Shai Hulud. Same with any access logs that you have. If you do use any of the affected packages, definitely go check for any suspicious activity on your build servers or your development machines too. Good news is, like, a lot of static application security testing tools like Sneak already have rules in place to like flag anything that may have been compromised. So if you're using something like that, you're off to a good start. But man, when will it end, Corey? The
Not
answer is never.
anytime soon. Welcome to the cat and mouse game that has been cybersecurity since the beginning of time.
Yeah, 100%. So moving on then to the last story. So you may have noticed, if you're a WatchGuard customer, we published new Fireware OS releases for all supported Firebox versions on Wednesday of this last week, which included a fix for CVE 2025-9242. So first off, all of the details are under the Security Advisory WGSA 2025-15. That will continue to be the place that will update as necessary for it, so definitely check that out. The issue, it's a pre-authentication memory corruption vulnerability. It could grant a unauthenticated remote attacker code execution on the Firebox under certain circumstances if the IK2 VPN is configured. The good news is not under active exploit, and there is no public exploit currently available. I've got pretty high confidence that we would know that and will know that if that ever changes. But like, it's a serious issue, and so we encourage all partners to go update their devices as quickly.
If I were to add one other thing on not under exploit, it was also found via internal processes. We have a very strong secure software development lifecycle, which includes internal testing and even private external testing. And by private external testing, I don't just mean a random researcher sending us something out of the blue. This was found via internal processes, which either way, we take it seriously no matter where it's found. But that just adds to the fact that it's not exploited externally as far as we can tell right now. No indicators of that whatsoever. And the point of this is, we want you to know about this and go patch it immediately. As long as you patch it, we found it in time that you can take care of it. But it is the class of flaw that if you don't patch it, it's going to be something you should worry about. And were you going to mention the workaround, or not in technical detail, but do know if for some reason, because we're gateway to devices, for any productive reason, if you can't patch quickly, there is a workaround, but we highly recommend you do the workaround very quickly if you're exposed to this.
Yep. So either way, stay up to make sure to follow that security advisory. That is where any additional updates will come. And patch your devices, please. But man, with that, Corey, what was the question I just asked a bit ago? When will it end? I cannot wait until
at the end of this, our news segment, we're always like, how can we be positive and nice? But it seems like we're always giving people crappy news. But the good guys
I
will
am,
win. Remember, the point of this awareness isn't because the world is on fire. It's because the more you know about this, the quicker you can take actions.
Yep.
And because attackers will continue to always be out there, there's always going to be a subset of malicious people. Keep your awareness up there. Keep taking the practical actions we're trying to give you, and you can remain safe and productive and use all the innovation of the technology tools we have today.
Until
That's
that
as positive I
innovation
can get.
automates you out of a job, in which case I am
Or
very
if
much looking forward to
you
retiring
believe
in the
some
woods.
AI experts, and when super intelligence exists, it will immediately probably kill us. So, yeah, no job or kill you.
Those are two great end outcomes of this.
Man, I feel sorry for everyone listening to the 443 for the first time.
Yeah, I'm gonna go rewatch The Lord of the Rings again to cheer myself up, I think.
We have to be the Gandalfs, the gray hats that say, "Thou shalt not pass." You
Doesn't
evil,
Gandalf like borderline die for a little bit though? Like that doesn't
and he
sound great
comes
either.
back even better.
That is true.
My
A
favorite
sweet
is
white beard.
Gandalf the Grey. Not Gandalf the White's cool, but Gandalf the Grey is the best.
That's fair. Fair enough. So thanks again for listening, everyone. As always, if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. If you have any questions on today's topics or suggestions for future episode topics, you can reach out to us on Blue Sky. I'm at itsmark.me. Corey's at SecAdept. Both of us are also on Twitter. No, not Twitter. That's gone. Instagram. At
Sorry.
WatchGuard_technologies. Corey, you're going to get us yelled at again by a couple of our listeners.
Or our publishers are suddenly going to be pulled down by the FCC, one or the other.
Tread that line carefully. Thanks again for listening, and you will hear from us again next week.
Yay, Mark, we did it. Woo!